I also noticed that Judy Blume's books were obviously written in a specific time, reflected a specific kind of society, but in many ways, what she has written has become timeless. And there's young people today still reading her books, resonating with them. But now they're just a small fraction of the media choices that young people have. They are inundated with all sorts of media and choices. Why, Pastor Alicia, do you feel, book maven, why do you feel that it is important that young people be exposed to stories like this, even though they might be from decades ago?
Oh, yes. I can wax eloquent about the role of literature for a while, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. I think literature, especially literature that stood the test of time, is really important for young folks to engage with. There's the and for adults as well, but we're specifically talking about young folks and their formation here. It has the capacity to touch a deep chord of our human experience. And there's this sense that like the more specifically we tell a story, the more universal it can become, right? None of us had exactly the same experience as Margaret did here in this book. However, it all touched us in a kind of unique way, right? Or it reminded us some of the experiences we had in common and some of the experiences that were different. And that is a really important way to reflect on our experience. John Dewey of educational fame, founder of the Dewey Decimal System, says that we don't learn by experience, we learn by reflecting on experience. We don't learn by experience, we learn by reflecting on experience. And so engaging literature, reading a book in a slow form, a long form manner, creates all of these opportunities for reflection, to reflect on our own experience, to reflect on the experiences of others, and to stitch them together in a way that helps us make sense of the world and of our place in it. Reading a book is an active exercise in empathy, like especially a book that is written in a first person perspective. Like we hear Margaret in her own voice. And then when you watch the film, there are all of these internal monologues where you hear Margaret particularly talking, and you're basically giving permission for somebody else's voice to take over your own thoughts, your own mind and your heart, right? That's like an active exercise in empathy and in walking in somebody else's experience, to let your focus be what somebody else is thinking, somebody else is feeling, what somebody else is experiencing. And that's really important, and something that can happen in a film in 2 hours can be then magnified in the 4 or 5 hours that it would take to read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, or even over a week. Say you're reading like 30 minutes a day in your free reading, your SSR, silent sustained reading in class or whatever, right? And that kind of extended experience of empathy and reflection is just helping us become generous, kind, compassionate, attentive human beings. And that's really important. The last thing I'll say is that there's a phrase in the book world, in the literature world, that we need books that are both windows and mirrors. Windows to show us an experience of somebody else, and mirrors to reflect back to us our own experience, right? And we need both of those together. If you're only ever reading books that validate who you are and what your experience has been in the world, you're missing billions and billions of other folks' experience. But if you're only reading about books of people other than you who have had different experiences than you, that can limit our imagination about who we are and how we can show up in the world, right? As a woman clergy person, it was so important for me to see women clergy represented, right? And to have like some words and some stories to validate my own experience, or to give me language to talk about things that I didn't know how to put into words. And that's across the board, whether it's a religious experience, a vocational experience, a familial experience, a cultural experience. We need stories to help us capture that. And so these classics that have stood the test of time are a great entryway into those kinds of conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I would love to add into the book Mavens, aka
Please,
Pat
by all means.
Alicia's answer. I think that's just beautiful, the empathy that is built in a story, right? The reflection that happens because you're exposed to the story, both the reflection about yourself and then like reflecting on someone else's story that then widens your perspective. And I also think that there is just a unique and special opportunity for a child to engage an adult in some real questions that they may not have known they had before and now have words for, or that they were a little shy to ask, but this book has emboldened them, that there's just space for a different conversation. It teaches them to start those sorts of things. I'm thinking about I don't know if you all saw the story about the little girl who got the sex ed book from the library that like helped her be able to tell her mother what was happening to her. That's because of a book, right? So I think that the same thing here, right? Like when children are exposed, when all of us are exposed, we get to like think through things and then ask out into the world, how do I reconcile this with what I think is the norm for me, is a really powerful change agent.